Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Female Trouble from 1974. Now, this is continuing my quest to review all of the films directed by John Waters. Female Trouble is probably the one John Waters film I know the least. I'd say it's the film I've definitely, probably of the early stuff, watched the least. Mostly because of its complete unavailability on video. If you're going to rent it from any video store in Baltimore, you had to give a deposit, including the rental fee. It was ridiculous to get this movie. And there's a couple times that, like, friends where we'd have, like, sleepovers and stuff, and we'd watch Female Trouble, and we'd all laugh at it, and the lines are great, and I'd quote it all the time. And it never became, for me, personally, as beloved as Pink Flamingo's Polyester Desperate Living of this early period. When I rewatched it to review it for this series, I kind of wondered if that would stay put, if my attitude towards Female Trouble would change. And I think it's still a movie that has some of the best lines of Waters' entire filmography. There's no way you can watch this movie and not quote some of the ridiculous dialogue, and he definitely tried to do something new, and it didn't actually really work out. It wasn't a hit at the time. He held off really re-releasing it because of that. And so through most of my time for liking John Waters, it wasn't as highly regarded, even though he likes it a lot. Even John Waters in the commentary kind of remarks a lot of things that he wouldn't do now. And I kind of look at this film as a transition film. I don't dislike what some say are the Hollywood Waters films or the films Hairspray and Beyond. I actually like a lot of those. So it's not that I don't like it because of me kind of trying to put John Waters' style in a box. Because often when I was watching it, I was like, maybe that's it, but I don't think that is. But it does feel like a transition, moving away from the Pink Flamingo style and going into the style that would eventually be a John Waters movie. If you look at Pecker, Hairspray, Serial Mom, especially Serial Mom, it almost feels like he artistically leaped a little too forward, but it's kind of an interesting leap for him to make at that time in his career. Dawn Davenport, played of course by Divine. She is a high school bad girl who keeps telling everyone if she doesn't get Cha-Cha heels for Christmas, then there will be hell to pay. And she doesn't get Cha-Cha heels for Christmas and throws the Christmas tree on top of her mom. After running away from home on Christmas morning, hitchhikes with this guy, also played by Divine, and then they kind of have sex where Divine literally fucks himself. There's both genders involved, so I'm not exactly sure how appropriately you would say that, but Divine has sex with himself. Divine fucks himself. I don't know, because I don't know how to say that correctly. Divine went from being raped by a giant lobster to being raped by him or herself. And then Dawn Davenport becomes pregnant with her daughter and tries to ask money of the guy who had sex with her, who's also Divine, and then he says go fuck yourself, which is pretty comical if you think about it. Then Dawn Davenport goes on to raise her child Taffy, starting to like work in restaurants and such, but eventually realizing that's boring, and then decides to rob people and commit various crimes to make her money. Then gets recognized at a fancy hair salon and turned into a famous model by the two people who own the hair salon, played by Mary Vivian Pierce and David Lockery. They start taking photos of her, and she starts becoming more and more famous as her world keeps getting out of control, and eventually gets acid thrown in her face and has a major show and becomes a major celebrity and a major criminal. Female Trouble was John Waters' first kind of post-Pink Flamingos movie, but it is obviously chronologically post, but the hit that was Pink Flamingos really wouldn't hit until 74 when this film was being made. So the whole idea of a huge hit of Pink Flamingos didn't really hit at the time and hit them while they were making this film. And they definitely made a more expensive movie. It looks like they knew a lot more of what they were doing while making Female Trouble, but I kind of wonder if this film would have been different, or the film he made following up a bigger hit like Pink Flamingos would have been different. Maybe that's more of Desperate Living. It was his way of breaking out and doing something different, and this was the first film not to play at midnight. Basically, like, you could see it during the day and such, and I think that didn't work originally for him. Also, this is kind of an epic. I don't think John Waters never really did an epic after this that covers from high school till motherhood till death. Is like a ridiculous range. He never really did a story like this again. It was interesting in the commentary when he first starts off, he says it's like one of his favorites of the early films, but then it feels like he's thinking about how he feels about crime, and crime is beautiful, and this whole crime is celebrity thing. And I think Serial Mom is a film that does that a lot better than Female Trouble. Female Trouble seems a little raw, it feels a little more nonsensical. This kind of a story, having a big epic, works with more of a tightly plotted film, even though most epics are rather ridiculous. And this film definitely plays into the melodramatic nature of that. And it's an interesting thing to do, and I think Divine does a great job in the film, but it just feels like he bit off maybe more than he could chew. This film's really entertaining, and most of my memories of this film is watching it with friends and laughing at all the various lines, whether it's the Christmas tree falling on the mom, whether it's about the Cha-Cha Hills, whether it's I wouldn't suck your dick if you had oxygen in your balls. I couldn't probably remember all the quotable lines in this. This probably has more quotable lines than any John Waters movie. I do think maybe he was too early to do something like this. It's too radical of a shift. In this, it does feel like he's trying to do a more mature comedy than Pink Flamingos, but still doing the kind of sophomoric juvenile humor that we're used to from John Waters. And it's an odd mix. There's certain parts I absolutely love of this movie and that I will always repeat and think of, and I've never stopped thinking about how hilarious they are, especially the opening. The opening up until after Divine rapes herself, that part is pretty flawless and up there with the best John Waters has ever done. This film feels very long. It feels like an epic. It really doesn't have the flow to it that even Pink Flamingos, and for my money his better films, really did. And you can tell he, like, since he taught in prisons, since he saw criminal cases, I think he looked at crime in a much different way, and that's why I think Serial Mom's probably the stronger movie. And John Waters, throughout his career and throughout the films I've seen now that I've been able to see from the very beginning till at least now, you see a lot of times he's taking on the same basic story and doing it in a different way. It's almost like he's constantly revising it and eventually coming up with the perfect way to do it. And in some ways, like the scene of Divine walking down the street, he's done that like 3 or 4 times at this point. But this film feels like his early attempt at doing more of what would become his Hollywood films, like the melodrama, the quotable lines, doing more of a Hollywood kind of a plot. He's not doing like the tit for tat thing that Pink Flamingos does. Now this film is still, like, when they re-rated it, it was X when it came out, it got re-rated and it was NC-17. It's never escaped its X rating. It doesn't feel as naughty and as gross out and as extreme as Pink Flamingos and these other films that are rated X, so I'm a little surprised. I guess the shocking scene of Divine raping herself, that scene is just so bizarre because it's like they filmed it all in one day. They had a double, and obviously you know how they did it, but it's just like the idea of doing something like that is just like, what the fuck? And The Lobster at least came out of nowhere. Let's up our game. Let's get some editing into it. That scene is an amazing scene because you really have to admire how well Divine played off herself. It's just a really bizarre situation that feels like it could have been a lot rougher than it was. It's probably one of the better made sequences of the film because a lot of it's like long takes and speeches and things like that. And in this, it feels like the more pro, like, technical level. I don't think anyone's really replicated that before, have they? I really doubt they have, especially the same actor. I feel like people have done it with different actors, but like the same actor in the same day, that's dedication. I know it's a ridiculous sequence and it's something to laugh at, but that's awe-inspiring that someone came up with that sequence and it plays as well as it does. That is kind of the big shocking moment of the film. You really have to know, I guess, but after you know, you can't forget. And they had to film all the stuff with Divine as a man first. I kind of like when Divine plays a man because it's so macho and butch and like he has this like grumbly voice. I kind of like that as a juxtaposition to Divine. It's very funny. This is really Divine's like woman picture, epic melodrama role. It feels like an old Hollywood's melodramatic woman's picture. John Waters' take on that. I know he talks about how certain shots are made to parody Valley of the Dolls, but it does feel like a 30s woman's picture in a lot of ways. You start off one place and you end somewhere completely different. I like Mink Stole a lot in this. Edith Massey in the bizarre S&M outfit, which is probably one of the more shocking outfits Edith Massey's ever worn. And I love the song Female Trouble. That is such a catchy, wonderful song. I've noticed when a film gets a VHS release early on and never did again, like this film and many other films, it really hurts their reputation a lot. And when Female Trouble got released on DVD, suddenly I knew all these people who had seen it, and I was like, oh, that one? I mean, I guess. To me, Pink Flamingos, Desperate Living, Polyester, and this one would be kind of left out. When I watch it, I've always wanted it to be in that perception that everyone else takes it in, and I still love the lines and laugh at it, but I just never fell in love with it as much, which is kind of odd because this is kind of one of my favorite periods of Waters from Pink Pink Flamingos to Polyester, and it is the odd man woman out. There's certain things I love about it. I love that the title's a period joke, and I like the Dreamlanders in it, and I like the acting, and I get what it's doing completely, and I like that actually, and I like Divine hitting Edith Massey with a fish. There's so much stuff I like about it, but it's just not a movie I don't think I would revisit it. Like Desperate Living and Pink Flamingos and Polyester, I have not probably gone 5 years without revisiting each of those. And Female Trouble, like, I watch so rarely, and mainly to quote lines from it, and it's honestly more fun to watch with someone else so you can talk over the boring parts. That's honestly how I remember watching it most of the time. And the first time I think we were all silent, but after that it was just us quoting and then laughing and then talking about something else, and it just never captured my attention the same way. I hate to say that about a John Waters film, and I think if you're watching this series you'd probably be a little shocked because you're like, you don't like this as much? It's kind of one of the bigger ones. I just don't. I'm sorry. Like, it's just never really been one of my favorites. Most of these films I can talk about how it shaped my perception of film and how it was a big deal and how it was like this cool edgy filmmaker that most people thought it was weird and stuff. And Female Trouble was kind of like this film my friends and I would watch really late at night because we didn't want our parents to know how we got a copy of it, and we'd watch it like in my friend Evan's like living room, and we'd laugh at it and laugh at the lines and quote them back to each other. It just wasn't something I was as into. I think he was more into it than I was. I never took from me. I always respected the hell out of it. I always kind of have a respect for it. I love the cha-cha heels thing. It was an interesting leap forward, and I think it kind of led the way to the more Hollywood films, the more melodrama of those films, which I think he did a lot better. This was probably a little too early for that, but maybe he just artistically making these shocking movies, and I think he wanted to do something different, and he did, but I don't think it's as successful as how he would do it later. I mean, when he did The Shocking Thing, it took him a couple movies to make something as great as Pink Flamingos, and I think Female Trouble kind of shows that it took him a while to make this kind of a movie really good. I think Female Trouble is kind of like an early rough draft of something he would do a lot better in Serial Mom, and it just shows the beginning of the arc of him as a filmmaker, and when he would reach that arc he would be amazing at it. But with this movie he's just starting that arc. He's not showing like kind of the brilliance and the amazingness of John Waters. He's just showing the beginning tropes of that, but it's not one of those Waters films that really defines Waters for me, and I don't think it really should. I think it's something that is more for the fans, but it's a little more enjoyable than the definitely more for the fans earlier stuff, but it's kind of still in that vein, and I think he more broke out of that in the next film, Desperate Living, than he did with this film. This film just feels like he's trying to break out of that mold. He's doing it in an interesting way, but he's almost like hasn't really made his second mold of his Hollywood films yet. He's still trying to figure it out. And this is somewhat of a transition film, but it transitions into something we won't see for like 10 years. It's a weird transition movie in a lot of ways. I think Polyester kind of does this idea a lot better, as Hairspray, Crybaby, especially Serial Mom, particularly with the crime element. I think the plotting of it kind of drags it down because it doesn't feel like it knows exactly the point it's making as much. It feels like it's reaching through these kind of genre plot structure to hopefully get it to work, and it doesn't feel like it hits it as hard, and it doesn't grab you as much, and it doesn't have those moments in it. It feels like his style almost demands that, and this film isn't giving it to you, and it feels like a little like it's letting you down. It's not that I refuse to accept that he doesn't have a scene where Divine's eating dog shit or something grosser. You could never follow that up, and Waters admits that. That's probably why this film is the way it is you can't follow that up. Female Trouble feels like he went into maybe a different avenue than he really should. So if you have seen Female Trouble and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Check out my other John Waters review in my John Waters review playlist. The annotation will be below. My next John Waters review will of course be Desperate Living. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.